6 weeks ago, my dad could still crack a crossword. Today, he can't hold a spoon. That single heart-wrenching sentence landed in my e-box last month. And honestly, it's why I'm here. When memories doesn't just fade, but evaporates at lightning speed, families are thrown into a tailspin, doctors scramble, and the comforting words are not that comforting anymore, because the word dementia suddenly feels utterly inadequate, too slow, too gentle. This isn't the familiar gentle slide of Alzheimer's, the one we often hear about. This is creutzfeldt-jakob's disease, CJD. And from the first forgotten name to the final heartbreaking breath, the entire course of this devastating illness can fit inside a single season. It's a rapid, relentless thief stealing not just memories, but coordination, personality, and ultimately life itself. So stick around, because in the next few minutes we are going to peel back the layers of this rare but critical condition. You'll learn the exact red flag signs that typically separates creutzfeldt-jakob's disease from every other form of dementia. The cutting-edge test neurologists discreetly order when they suspect it, and most importantly, the one crucial question you absolutely should ask your doctor if you even suspect this nightmare is happening to someone you love.
The speed gap.
Let's kick things off with the most glaring difference, the one that often sends shivers down family spines. Time to think about classic Alzheimer's. Its slow burn creeping forward over years, sometimes even decades. You measure its progress in forgotten anniversaries, misplaced car keys that becomes a daily ritual, or a gradual struggle to recall names. It's a long, sad goodbye. Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, however, doesn't creep, it absolutely sprints. Families frequently describe it as sudden, brutal shock, often saying something like, "It felt like we blinked and he was gone." Medically speaking, this means a notable and often dramatic decline in memory, personality, or physical coordination within the matter of weeks to just a few short months. If you were to chart the progress of these conditions, Alzheimer's would look like a long downhill hike, a gradual descent. Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, on the other hand, looks like falling off a cliff. It's a terrifying drop. The sheer velocity of this terrifying acceleration of symptoms is often the very first and arguably the most critical big clue that we are dealing with something far more aggressive than the typical dementia. It is the hallmark that screams, "This isn't normal."
The early warning signs nobody talks about.
Now let's ditch the Hollywood cliché of the old man who forgets where he lives. While memory loss is certainly part of creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, the initial oddities are usually far more subtle and, frankly, quite weird. We are talking about things like sudden, inexplicably inability to judge distance while driving, making parking a terrifying ordeal, or perhaps a grocery list written in perfectly legible penmanship, but filled with words that simply does not exist. A strange linguistical scramble. Sometimes it's involuntary jerking, tight muscles that violently wake someone up at 2 a.m., or a persistent, unsettling feeling of imbalance. Doctors often bundle these under the umbrella term rapidly progressive dementia plus. And that plus matters. It signals the presence of additional neurological symptoms that are less common in early Alzheimer's. We are talking about visual distortions, seeing things that aren't there, or trouble processing what is there, or significant balance stumble leading to frequent falls, a condition known as ataxia. And then there are a word I'm going to slaughter. Myoclonus. Those sudden shock-like muscle jerks that looks like someone flickering you with an invisible finger. These aren't just minor quirks. If any of these plus symptoms show up together and escalate rapidly, as seasoned neurologists, internal alarm bells start ringing, loud and clear. They know something serious and fast-moving is afoot.
The MRI that gives it away?
So how do doctors confirm this terrifying suspicion? Step 1 is an MRI, but it is not the garden variety scan you might get for a headache. We are talking about specific advanced sequences. They order diffusion weighted images, or DWI for short, and often fluid attenuated inversion recovery FLAIR. These aren't just pretty pictures. They're looking for very particular pattern of bright signals in the brain. These patterns is so specific to creutzfeldt-jakob's disease it even has its own nickname. The hockey stick sign, or sometimes described as the cortical ribbon. You'll see these bright signals light up in the coordinate nucleus and the putamen. I think I got them right, but correct me in the comment if I didn't. Two deep brain control centers you've probably never heard of, but which acts like runway beacons in creutzfeldt-jakob's disease. These aren't just random abnormalities, they represent areas of restricted diffusion, essentially showing where brain cells are rapidly dying and swelling. In good studies, this characteristic MRI pattern boasts an impressive sensitivity of around 91 to 98% and specificity, I hate that word, of 93 to 97% for diagnosing creutzfeldt-jakob's disease. Translation: when you see this on an MRI, you almost certainly looking at creutzfeldt-jakob's disease, not the diffused atrophy of Alzheimer's, not the subtle changes of Lewy body dementia, and definitely not just a bad hangover. It's a powerful diagnostic tool that helps distinguish creutzfeldt-jakob's disease from other rapidly progressive dementias.
The spinal tap secret?
The MRI is the smoking gun. Then the spinal tap or lumbar puncture provides the crucial fingerprint. Neurologists now run two incredibly important tests on the cerebrospinal fluids. First up is the 1433 protein. Think of it as 1433 as a distress flare that neurons throw out when they are dying rapidly. It is often elevated in creutzfeldt-jakob's disease, a clear sign of significant neurological damage. However, here's the catch. It can also pop up in other acute neurological conditions like stroke or some form of encephalopathy. So while it's highly supportive of a creutzfeldt-jakob's disease diagnosis, especially in patients clinically suspected of having creutzfeldt-jakob's disease, it's not definitive on its own. Its sensitivity can be quite high, around 85 to 96%, but its specificity can vary, sometimes being as low as 46 in broader context, meaning it can give false positives. But then there are the game changer, RT/QUIC. This stands for real-time quirking induced conversion. This isn't just looking for neural distress. It directly detects the misfolded prion protein, PRPSC, the very corporate that causes creutzfeldt-jakob's disease. It's like a COVID PCR test, but for misfolded junk proteins in your brain. The RTQUIC works by amplifying even tiny amounts of these misfolded prions, making them detectable. While it can be slow to process, taking anywhere from 30 hours to several days depending on the generation of tests. When it is positive, you're pretty much done guessing. It boasts an incredible specificity of nearly 100% and a sensitivity of 90 to 97% range for sporadic creutzfeldt-jakob disease. That's why a positive RT-QUIC in cerebral spinal fluid is now a core diagnostic criteria for probable creutzfeldt-jakob disease. Most community hospitals still send their test to specialized reference labs, so families often don't even know it exists unless they specifically ask. And you absolutely should. They can even perform RT-QUIC on other tissues like nasal brushing with similar high accuracy.
The EEG that flickers?
Let's not forget about the old school but still remarkably useful electroencephalogram or EEG. This test measures electrical activity of the brain. While it might not be the flashiest test, it offers another critical piece of the puzzle. Around 2/3 of disease patients eventually develops what are called periodic sharp wave complexes. Think of them as a distinct high amplitude electrical burst, almost like lightning storms occurring every second or so. The pattern can look like a metronome on the verge of a seizure, a rhythmic triphasic wave pattern that is highly suggestive of creutzfeldt-jakob disease. Now it's important to note that this distinct pattern doesn't typically show up on day one. So a negative EEG doesn't necessarily clear you from suspicion. However, if you are hunting for clues in a patient with rapidly progressive dementia and the brain's electrical tracing starts matching in this lockstep periodic fashion, you got another strong vote for creutzfeldt-jakob disease. It's a supportive finding that combines with other diagnostic markers help solidify the diagnosis.
Ruling out the imposters.
Here is where good doctors truly earn their keep, distinguishing themselves from the rest. Rapidly progressive dementia, RPD, has a surprisingly long and diverse hit list of mimics. These conditions can look terrifying, similar to creutzfeldt-jakob disease, but are crucially often treatable and even reversible. We are talking about things like autoimmune encephalitis, where the body's own immune system attacks the brain, or severe thyroid storm, a metabolic emergency. Then there are critical vitamin deficiencies like B12, which can cause profound neurological symptoms. Even syphilis, an infection many consider a relic of the past, can present with rapidly progressive cognitive decline. And let's not forget certain cancers, particularly those that cause paraneoplastic syndrome. Oh, I hate pronouncing that word. Where the immune response to a tumor affects the brain. There are also vascular causes, various infections beyond syphilis, and toxic exposures. The rule-out panel for these conditions can feel like navigating an alphabet soup. ANA for autoimmune condition, TSH for thyroid, infectious disease screening, heavy metal test, and more. But skipping these throughout workup is a dangerous gamble. Why? Because it means you could tragically miss something treatable, something that could give a loved one their life back. One study, for instance, found that a significant proportion, sometimes as high as 10 to 15% of suspected creutzfeldt-jakob disease cases actually turn out to be autoimmune conditions. And some of those patients, after receiving the correct diagnosis and treatment literally walked out of the hospital on their own 2 feet, making remarkable recoveries. This is why every specialist worth their title repeats the mantra: never call it creutzfeldt-jakob disease until you have ruled out everything that could forgive you for being wrong. It's a painstaking process, but it's absolutely essential to ensure that someone isn't wrongly condemned to an untreatable disease when a path to recovery might exist. This thoroughness also helps differentiate creutzfeldt-jakob disease from common dementias like Alzheimer's. While some form of Alzheimer's can progress more rapidly, they typically lack the specific MRI and fluid findings of creutzfeldt-jakob disease and often doesn't present with the same dramatic plus symptoms like myoclonus or visual disturbances.
Why are biopsies almost never done?
Families are desperate for certainty and answers sometimes plead with neurologists for brain biopsy. It feels like the most direct way to know, doesn't it? But in the case of creutzfeldt-jakob disease, most neurologists will, with rare exception, refuse this request. Why? Because there's currently no treatment for creutzfeldt-jakob disease, and a brain biopsy is not a trivial procedure. It carries a very real risk, including infection, hemorrhage, and even worsening neurological deficits. It's an invasive surgery, and if it wouldn't change the course of treatment, the risk usually outweighs the benefit. The definitive proof: seeing the characteristic spongiform holes where the brain tissue literally looks like a sponge, and the accumulation of misfolded prion plaques usually comes at autopsy. That is when the fight is over and the brain can be safely examined without risk to the living patient. Until then, the powerful combination of a rapid clinical picture, that terrifying fast progression of dementia, the classic MRI findings, those bright signals and cortical ribbons, a positive RTQUIC from the spinal fluid, and the supportive EEG patterns gives what's considered a probable diagnosis. This level of diagnostic confidence is accepted worldwide, allowing families and medical teams to move forward with appropriate care and planning, even without a living brain biopsy.
The one question to ask your doctor:
if you're sitting in a consultation room watching a loved one fade week by week, feeling helpless and overwhelmed, there's one powerful question you can ask. It's a question that can cut through the noise and ensure the most thorough investigation. It's a question that tells the medical team you're informed and you are advocating for the best possible care. Ask: are we doing DWR, MRI, and RTQUIC? Those 2 terms, DWI and RTQUIC, are specific. They tell the medical team you understand the stakes and you want the full cutting-edge workup for a rapidly progressive dementia. This isn't just about showing off. It can genuinely shape weeks, sometimes even crucial months, of what can often be a frustrating and agonizing diagnostic odyssey. This tangent approach can spare your loved one from unnecessarily and ineffective treatments like antidepressants and Alzheimer's pills or antipsychotics, which not only doesn't help creutzfeldt-jakob disease patients, but can actually worsen some of the jerking movements and other symptoms. Asking these questions ensures that a diagnostic process is streamlined, accurate, and focused on identifying or ruling out disease as quickly as possible. I made this channel for one reason: so professionals don't have to face these terrifying cases alone, sometimes even to help families get a better understanding. And If this video saved you from a frantic late night Googling spiral, please hit that like button and share it with someone you know will appreciate this information. And if you want to help me extra much, then click subscribe and that bell notification icon so you get notified every time I upload a new video. Let's get on with the video.
There is hope on the horizon.
Let's be brutally honest. Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease remains a fatal diagnosis, usually claiming lives within a year of symptom onset. There's no sugarcoating that devastating fact. However, the scientific community isn't standing still. Research is moving and there's genuine hope on the horizon. For instance, the first antibody-based blood test for prions are now in early trials, aiming for earlier and less invasive detection. Even more exciting are the gene slicing therapies, specifically sensi oligonucleotide, this one, also known as ASO, that have shown promising results in animal models. These therapies work by essentially shutting off the production of the normal prion protein in the brain, thereby preventing it from misfolding and accumulating. In mice, these ASOs have bought extra months of life, a significant breakthrough in a disease measured in weeks. Clinical trials using ASOs are now underway in human trials, representing a potential paradigm shift in how we approach this disease. The Creutzfeldt-Jakob Disease Foundation is an incredible resource. They're there to help, guide and inform with helplines, with websites, with all of that. So let's focus on the absolutely essential. Speed is the signature of Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease. We are talking weeks, not years, for devastating progression. When you're watching someone decline rapidly, look for those plus symptoms: that sudden jerk, the vision jump, the balance flops. Don't hesitate to demand the comprehensive diagnostic workup. Specifically ask your doctor about DWR, MRI and RT-QUIC tests. And before you accept what might feel like a death sentence, insist that they meticulously rule out all the fakes, the treatable imposters that can mimic Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease. Remember, when memories dissolve at lightning speed, knowledge and associative advocacy are the only things left that can move faster. And if you want to know more about dementia, then check out this playlist right here, where I go much more in depth with dementia, because dementia is a big topic and I have made an entire playlist for it. So check it out right there, and I look forward to seeing you over there.